Captain Lena Rourke stood in the heart of the shipyard, her eyes scanning the enormous chamber as she tried to absorb the scale of what they had just uncovered. The air was thick with dust, the metal walls of the forgotten shipyard glistening with a dim, otherworldly light, as if something ancient was stirring deep within the facility. The only sounds were the creaks of the shipyard's aging systems and the soft hum of the eye, an entity she hadn't even begun to comprehend. Lena's hands gripped the edge of a long, weathered control panel. It looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries, yet somehow it responded to her touch. She keyed in another command, and the display flashed with a cascade of lights. Suddenly, the entire room seemed to tremble, a low vibration running through the floor, a hum that felt as if the very bones of the shipyard were waking up. "That's it," murmured Dr. Marcus Hale, the team's archaeologist, as he watched the interface light up. "We're triggering something. I can feel it." Lena's pulse quickened. There was no turning back now. Whatever this place was, it was responding to them. The shipyard's dormant systems were awakening, and if what the AI had said was true, this was no ordinary relic. This was humanity's lost weapon, a relic of a time when Earth was a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. "Lena," came a voice from the rear. Sergeant Tessa Grant, the team's military expert, approached. Her face was grim. "We've got a problem." Lena turned, her eyes narrowing. "What's happening?" Tessa pointed to the horizon through the shipyard's viewports. A series of dark shapes were appearing in Earth's orbit, slowly becoming clearer as they neared the planet. There was something wrong about them. No light reflecting off their hulls, no visible markings or symbols, just cold, oppressive ships closing in. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She knew those ships. Everyone did. The Calidrim. "How long?" Lena asked, already pulling up the coordinates on the display. "Less than 30 minutes, Tessa replied, her voice tense. Lena's eyes darted between the screen and the shipyard's AI interface. The shipyard wasn't fully restored yet. Only the basic systems had come online. The first warship, a massive vessel in the shape of an ancient human cruiser, was still in pieces. "We're not ready," Lena muttered, her mind racing. "Doesn't matter," Marcus interjected. "We're not the only ones who know this place exists." Tessa turned to Lena, her gaze steady. "Captain, we need to activate the ships now. If we wait, they'll wipe us out before we even have a chance." Lena looked at the AI interface. The ancient voice responded to her silently, processing her every thought. It was a strange feeling, like the shipyard was alive, listening. She was connected to it, drawn in by the remnants of a power long forgotten. "Prepare the ship," Lena ordered, making a decision. "If we're going to survive, we need to move fast. Everyone, get to your stations. This isn't just a restoration anymore. It's a fight for survival." The team scrambled into action, knowing that the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. As the Calidrim warships loomed ever closer, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the shipyard had been waiting for this moment, for Earth's final battle. The question was, would they be ready in time? The tension inside the shipyard was suffocating. Lena's mind raced as she stared at the flickering screens in front of her, watching the countdown of the approaching Calidrim ships. 30 minutes. That was all they had before Earth's last hope was crushed before it even had a chance to rise. "Status on the restoration." Lena barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Engines are offline," reported Technician Ian Wu, his fingers flying over his terminal. "Shields are barely functional. Weapons, not even close." Lena gritted her teeth. The shipyard had only been activated moments ago, and the restoration process was still in its infancy, but they had no choice. They were the last line of defense. "Get the first ship operational. We'll have to make do with what we've got." Behind her, she could hear the muffled sounds of the crew scrambling to the nearest warship's hull, their movements quick and purposeful. The gigantic vessel, its metal dark and foreboding, loomed over them, a hulking relic of a forgotten war. It was human in design, But its technology was something far beyond Earth's current understanding, a strange fusion of ancient human ingenuity and alien enhancements. "Lena, we've intercepted another transmission," Dr. Marcus Hale said, his voice strained as he tapped away at a nearby console, his brow furrowed in concern. "It's not from the Caldrum. It's coming from somewhere else." Lena swung her gaze to him. "What do you mean?" "A different faction." "It's hard to tell," Marcus replied. "But the message is definitely encoded. Something's deliberately trying to stay hidden. It's not Caldrum language. Could be a distress signal. Or a trap." Tessa chimed in, her face tight with suspicion. Marcus didn't answer, but the unease in his eyes spoke volumes. Earth had been isolated for centuries, and any signal from the unknown was a dangerous unknown. "We'll have to deal with that later," Lena decided, her mind still focused on the imminent threat. "Right now, we've got to deal with the Caldrum first." As the countdown continued, Lena's thoughts began to race. They were no longer just a team of explorers. They were the last defense of a planet that had been all but forgotten by the galaxy. The Caldrum had been responsible for the devastation of Earth, the ones who had broken the planet's once proud fleet and driven humanity into hiding. Now they had found Earth once again, and this time there would be no escape. "Targeting systems online," came the voice of the AI, cool and emotionless. "Activating shield generators. We have a 25% chance of surviving the first wave." "Not good enough," Lena muttered, looking back at the crew assembling around the ship. "We need to be at full strength. We can't afford to be half ready." The shipyard rumbled again, this time more violently, as if protesting the urgency of the task. The AI's voice cut through the noise. "Initiating emergency protocols. Prepare for immediate launch." Lena didn't hesitate. She grabbed her comlink, her voice steady but urgent. "All hands, brace for launch. We don't have much time." The first warship's engines roared to life, a guttural, mechanical sound that reverberated throughout the shipyard. With a deafening roar, the ship began to rise, its massive bulk slowly breaking free from the gravitational pull of the shipyard. For a brief moment, it seemed like the world had paused, as though the shipyard itself was holding its breath. But Lena knew that nothing would be as simple as it seemed. The Caldron ships were closing in fast, and Earth's last hope was now barreling into space with a fleet of warships still in pieces, its defenses untested. As the warship ascended, Lena looked to the heavens, her mind already focused on the coming battle. This was their moment. The warship's engines hummed a deep, resonant tone as it tore through the atmosphere, a metallic beast awakening from its long slumber. Lena could feel the vibrations beneath her feet, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. The shipyard, once dormant for millennia, had become the birthplace of Earth's last chance at survival. And now, with the first of the warships roaring into space, the fate of humanity rested on the thin edge of a blade. "Status report, Wu," Lena called over the comms, her eyes fixed on the display screens ahead of her. "Shields at 15%. Ian Wu's voice crackled back. "Engines stable, but we're flying blind. Weapons systems are coming online, but we're not ready for a full engagement." Lena's gaze flickered to the incoming Caldrum fleet, their dark shapes now clearer as they approached, their jagged silhouettes cutting through space like the harbingers of doom. There were at least a dozen ships in the fleet, massive, heavily armed, and far more advanced than anything Earth had seen before. She could almost feel the weight of their presence, an oppressive reminder of how outmatched they were. "I'll take what we can get," Lena said, her voice steady despite the rising tension in her chest. "Activate any weapons we can get to work. We have to buy time for the other ships." Tessa was already at her side, hands flying over the auxiliary control panels, sensing the warship's systems to her commands. "Ready to engage," she said, her voice calm but laced with an edge of anticipation. Lena took a deep breath. "Engage." The ship lurched forward as the forward-facing cannons powered up. The first shot fired with a thunderous explosion, its trajectory veering off course. The weapon was sluggish, its targeting system still calibrating after centuries of disuse. But it was enough to send a Caldrum ship swerving, a jagged bolt of energy carving a path through space and narrowly missing its target. "First hit," Tessa exclaimed, her voice tinged with a note of hope. Lena's heart raced, but she knew it wasn't enough. The Caldrum weren't retreating. They were closing in. The warship was still far from fully operational, its systems a patchwork of ancient tech and alien technology hastily reassembled. It was a miracle that it had even launched. "Get the forward cannons back online," Lena ordered, her mind calculating their next moves. As the ship drifted into position, readying for another volley, a blast of energy from one of the Caldrum ships struck the warship's side. The hull groaned, a violent shudder passing through the ship. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered. Tessa staggered, grabbing hold of the console as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated for a moment. "We've lost hull integrity on the port side." Ian's voice rang out in panic. "Shields are at 5%. We can't take much more of this. Hold it together." Lena snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. She turned to the eyes interface, watching as the ship's remaining systems flickered. "Activate secondary weapons." The AI responded coldly, "Secondary weapons offline. Initiating emergency protocols. Weapons firing sequence complete." The ship's last defense, an experimental energy cannon developed in secret by Earth's greatest minds, flared to life. A massive beam of pure energy shot forward, its brilliance blinding as it slammed into the closest Caldrum warship. The ship crumpled under the intensity of the blast, exploding into a cloud of debris. For a brief moment, the crew dared to breathe. They'd inflicted damage. The Caldrum fleet was not invincible. But their victory was short-lived. As the first enemy ship disintegrated, the remaining Caldrum ships surged forward, their relentless assault continuing with a new fervor. They weren't just attacking, they were hunting, and Earth's warship was their prey. "Brace for impact," Lena shouted, her hands gripping the controls as she guided the ship into evasive maneuvers. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and struggling to keep up with the tide of battle. But one thing was clear: humanity wasn't done yet. The chaos of battle raged outside, but inside the warship, Lena and her crew had little time to breathe. They were pushing the ship's systems to their breaking point, the fragile patchwork of old human tech and alien enhancements struggling to keep pace with the Caldrum's relentless assault. The ship groaned under each blast, the hull vibrating as if protesting their desperate fight for survival. Lena sat at the command center, her fingers moving over the console in a blur, inputting commands to stabilize their shields and reroute power to critical systems. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the mysterious signal Marcus had intercepted earlier. Who else knew about the shipyard's revival? The Caldrum were only part of the puzzle, and she had a growing sense that something far worse than the aliens was lurking in the background. "Lena," Marcus's voice pulled her back to reality. He was standing at the side of the bridge, his face pale, his expression grave. "I've decrypted the message. You need to see this." Lena's stomach twisted as she turned to face him. She had no idea what to expect, but the look in Marcus's eyes told her it was bad. He handed her a tablet, and the screen flickered as a series of cryptic symbols appeared, each more unsettling than the last. The language was unfamiliar, an ancient code that seemed both human and alien. "What is this?" Lena asked, her voice sharp. "It's a distress signal," Marcus explained, tapping the screen to reveal more data. "But it's not just from any faction. It's from Earth, from centuries ago. The date: this was broadcast just before the final war began. It's an encrypted message from the last fleet commander of Earth's defense forces." Lena's heart sank. A message from Earth. But that's impossible. Marcus nodded solemnly. "Not just any message. It's a warning. The fleet commander details the events leading up to the betrayal, how humanity was brought to the brink of extinction by someone who was supposed to be their greatest ally. Lena stared at the screen, trying to piece together what Marcus was saying. The Caldrim had been responsible for Earth's near annihilation, but this message revealed something far darker. A betrayal from within, from someone who had once been part of humanity's greatest defenders. The fleet commander, he mentions a high-ranking officer named General Kale. Marcus continued, his voice low. He was once a hero, someone revered by humanity and its allies. But when the Caldrim offered an alliance, Kale turned against his own people. He handed over Earth's most powerful weapon, the shipyard we've just activated, and set the stage for the downfall of humanity. Lena's mind reeled. The name rang a bell. General Kale had been a legendary figure, one of the last commanders to hold Earth's forces together before the collapse. It was said that he had died in battle, but this message painted a different picture, a far more sinister one. Kale is alive, Marcus whispered, and he's leading the Caldrim. He was the one who betrayed us, and now he's coming back to finish what he started. Lena's hands tightened around the edge of her console. It wasn't just the Caldrim she had to worry about now. The very man who had once been Earth's greatest defender was the architect of its destruction, and he was coming for them. We need to prepare for the worst, Lena said, her voice hardening with resolve. If Kale is leading them, we're not just facing an alien force. We're facing a traitor who knows everything about us. This fight is going to be harder than we thought. The crew fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a storm cloud. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their past, to confront the darkness that had been hidden for far too long. Outside, the Caldrim ships continued their assault, but in Lena's mind, the real battle had only just begun. The warship lurched again, another blast from the Caldrim fleet slamming into their shields, sending vibrations rippling through the entire ship. Lena's hands were steady, though her mind raced. The revelation of General Kale's betrayal had shattered any illusions she'd held about the enemy. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a personal war, one rooted in a deep, festering wound that Earth had carried for centuries. Status report, Wu, Lena ordered, her voice clipped as she fought to maintain control. Shields at critical levels, Captain. Ian Wu's voice came back, tight with concern. We're taking on water, and the engine's cooling system is about to fail. We need to make repairs, or we'll be dead in the water. Lena turned her attention to the view screen, watching the Caldrim ships circle, their movements deliberate, like predators sizing up their prey. Despite their numerical advantage, they were toying with them, no doubt waiting for Earth's last line of defense to falter. We're not going to give them that satisfaction, Lena muttered under her breath. Tessa, get down to engineering. Help Wu stabilize the systems. We need to keep this ship operational for as long as possible. Tessa didn't hesitate. She turned sharply on her heel, already moving toward the ship's hatch. Understood, Captain. I'll get it fixed or die trying. Lena watched her leave, a knot of worry tightening in her stomach. There was no room for error, no time for mistakes. The Caldrim weren't waiting for them to regroup. They'd press the attack until they had no choice but to surrender. Marcus, any more on the message? Lena asked, trying to refocus her mind on the task at hand. I've decrypted most of it, Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the tablet as he continued to analyze the data. Kale was one of the highest-ranking generals in the Earth Defense Fleet during the early days of the Caldrim War. He was revered, practically a living legend. But something changed. The last part of the message, before the signal cuts off, mentions the core. It's vague, but it's referring to something buried beneath the shipyard. Whatever it is, it's important. Lena's brow furrowed. The core. Could it be related to Earth's lost weapon? It's possible, Marcus answered. If Cal's betrayal was linked to this core, it could be the key to everything. The Caldrim might not be after Earth's fleet. They might be after this weapon. Lena's mind churned with possibilities. If Cal had given the Caldrum access to this core, it meant they had a weapon capable of obliterating entire fleets. It was no longer just about fighting for survival. It was about preventing humanity from being wiped off the face of the galaxy once and for all. "We need to find it," Lena said, her voice low but filled with a fierce determination. "We need to take control of the core before Cal does." Marcus nodded. "I agree. But without proper intel, we're flying blind. If we don't have the full picture, we could be walking straight into Cal's trap." Lena didn't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect solution. They were already on the precipice. "Prepare to deploy a recon team. I'll leave the mission myself. We don't have the time to wait for more answers. We need to act." Outside, the Caldrum fleet pressed forward, undeterred. Earth's warship was hanging by a thread, but Lena could feel it. A spark, a defiant will to survive burning within her. There was no turning back now. They had no choice but to move forward, into the heart of the storm. The warship's engines hummed ominously, the sounds of impending destruction echoing across the command deck. Lena tightened her grip on the console. They were going to take back their future. The battle outside had become a desperate struggle for Earth's survival. Lena's heart raced as she issued orders, her mind now laser-focused on the mission ahead. Every second counted. The Caldrum were relentless, their ships closing in with deadly precision, but it was the core beneath the shipyard that would determine the outcome of this war. If they didn't seize it, Earth was doomed, not just to the Caldrum, but to the ghost of General Cal, whose betrayal had set this all in motion. "Recon team, report to the hangar," Lena ordered over the comms, her voice crisp with command. "We're deploying immediately." Tessa and Ian were already in motion, along with a handful of the shipyard's last remaining security personnel. Lena could hear their boots echoing down the corridors as they gathered their gear. But before she could join them, Marcus grabbed her arm, his grip firm. "Lena, we don't know what's down there," Marcus said, his voice low, a mixture of worry and urgency. "The core, it could be something more than just a weapon. If Cal's been hiding it for all these years, there's a reason. This isn't just a race against the Caldrum. It's a race against the unknown." Lena met his gaze, her jaw clenched. She knew the risks. Hell, she had lived the nightmare of a broken humanity that had come close to extinction once before. She had seen what the Caldrum were capable of. But she also knew that their only hope lay in taking the fight to the heart of the shipyard, to the core. They didn't have the luxury of indecision. They had no time to waste. "We'll be careful," Lena said, her voice steady, though her mind was already processing a dozen possible scenarios. "But we don't have a choice, Marcus. If the Caldrum get control of the core, we're done." Marcus didn't reply, but his expression told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't sure they would make it out alive, and neither was she. But they didn't have the luxury of fear. In the hangar, Lena suited up with the rest of the recon team. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the lower levels of the shipyard, find the core, and secure it at all costs. If they were lucky, they might learn more about what Cal had hidden away all those years. But luck was a luxury no one aboard the ship had. The hangar doors opened with a slow, grinding sound, revealing the cold expanse of space beyond. A small shuttle, its engines already humming, awaited them. Lena climbed aboard, her mind already calculating their approach. The Caldrum ships were too far away for a direct assault, at least for now. Their best chance was to slip under their radar, make it to the core's location, and figure out what they were dealing with. As the shuttle lifted off from the warship, Lena's eyes turned to the dark expanse of the shipyard below. The massive structure loomed, silent and foreboding. This had once been a place of creation, a place where Earth's greatest fleet had been forged. Now it was a tomb, a reminder of everything that had been lost. The shuttle cut through the shipyard's empty corridors, its lights flickering as they passed long abandoned hangars and dormant weapon platforms. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence became. It was as if the shipyard itself was watching them, waiting for them to make a fatal mistake. Lena's pulse quickened. There was something alive down here. Not in the way a crew could breathe life into a ship, but in the way a predator waits for its prey to wander into its trap. They reached the central chamber, where the core was said to reside. The doors to the chamber slid open with a deep hiss, revealing a vast, cavernous space. And in the center, surrounded by twisting alien technology, stood what they had come for. The core. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something much older, something far beyond human understanding. Its pulsing light seemed to resonate through the air itself, a steady hum that sent chills down Lena's spine. The air around it shimmered, as though reality itself was bending to its will. And there, standing before it, was General Kale. Lena froze as she saw the figure standing before the core. There, in the dim, eerie light of the cavernous chamber, stood General Kale. His once pristine uniform, now tarnished and aged, hung loosely from his frame. His face, weathered and scarred, was marked by years of solitude. An exile, or perhaps something worse. His eyes, however, were the same cold, calculating eyes Lena had seen in old records, in the images of a hero who had turned traitor. Kale. Lena's voice was sharp, betraying none of the shock she felt. She had known, in some corner of her mind, that this moment would come, but seeing him here, alive, felt like a punch to the gut. The man who had once been the embodiment of Earth's military strength was now the architect of its destruction. Cal's lips curled into a faint smile, his expression devoid of remorse. "I see you've made it this far, Captain." Lena's grip tightened around her weapon. "I should have known you were behind this," she spat, her anger rising. "You sold us out to the Caldrum. You gave them everything." Kale tilted his head, as though the accusation amused him. "Sold you out? No, Lena. I saved you. You just don't understand yet." "Saved us," she repeated incredulously, stepping forward, her voice rising. "You betrayed Earth. You turned your back on humanity for the Caldrum." Kale shook his head slowly, as if explaining something simple to a child. "I did what was necessary. I saw the truth before anyone else. Earth's decline was inevitable. The Caldrum, understandable as they are the future. The core, what you see here, is not just a weapon, Lena. It's the key to something greater. With it, we can rise above the weakness that has plagued humanity for centuries." Lena's mind raced. She remembered the warning in the decrypted message. Kale had been part of a faction of Earth's leadership who believed humanity was on the brink of collapse, that the Caldrum offered a way to escape the impending destruction. He had believed the future of Earth lay not in unity with its people, but in subjugation by the Caldrum. But this was worse than betrayal. It was madness. "General, you're insane," Lena said, her voice steady despite the rage bubbling within. "This future you're talking about isn't salvation. It's the end of everything we ever stood for." Cal's smile faded, replaced by a hard, cold stare. "You still don't understand, do you, Lena? Earth was a dying relic. Humanity was weak. We were barely holding on, a shell of our former selves. The core is the evolution. With it, I can guide us to a future beyond what your limited perspective can comprehend." Lena stepped forward, her hand never leaving the hilt of her weapon. "You'll never control this. We'll stop you." Cal's eyes darkened. "I no longer need to control it, Captain. I've unlocked the potential of the core. The Caldrum may have been the ones to forge it, but I'm the one who truly understands its power. And soon, you'll all see what true power really is." Without warning, Cal raised his hand, and the core responded. The pulsating light from the alien technology surged, flooding the room with an almost blinding brilliance. A ripple of energy pulsed outward from the core, as if it were alive in a way that could bend the laws of physics itself. Lena stumbled back, instinctively raising her weapon. But before she could react, a tremor shook the ground beneath them. The core's energy was reaching out, warping the air around it, pulling at reality itself. Do you see now? Cal's voice was almost a whisper, but it carried across the chamber with a chilling finality. I've awakened the true potential of the core. You cannot stop what's already been set in motion. Lena's mind was racing. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was a conduit for something far more dangerous, something capable of bending space, time, and perhaps even the fabric of the universe itself. Cal wasn't just trying to destroy Earth. He was trying to reshape the very foundation of reality. And they were standing right in its path. The chamber trembled with the power of the core, its energy bending the air around them, twisting reality in ways Lena couldn't even comprehend. She staggered back, instinctively raising her weapon to aim at Cal, but the sheer force of the energy radiating from the core made it feel like her body was being pulled in all directions. Cal stood motionless, his eyes closed, his expression serene, as though he were communing with something far beyond human understanding. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps as she fought to keep her footing. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature, a living thing, and it was beginning to consume the room around them. Cal, stop this, Lena shouted, trying to break his focus. This madness won't save humanity. It will destroy everything. Cal opened his eyes, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in his gaze, something almost sad, almost regretful. You don't understand, Lena. You're still thinking in terms of your old world, the one that's dying. Earth is no longer our future. The Caledron and I have seen the truth. This is our salvation. Lena shook her head, desperate. You think the Caledron are saving us. They'll enslave us all. Cal, you've become one of them. His face hardened, and he lifted his hand again. The core pulsed with more intensity, the light blinding. The room seemed to bend, twisting in unnatural ways, as though reality itself was warping to the will of the core. But then, Lena's heart skipped a beat. She felt something shift, something deep inside the ship, beneath the shipyard, as if a second presence had entered the fray. It wasn't just the core. It wasn't just Cal. There was something else at play. Something's wrong. Marcus's voice came through her comms, his tone filled with alarm. Lena, you need to get out of there. This isn't just Cal. There's something more at work here. The core is connected to the shipyard's central systems. It's drawing power from the entire station. Lena's eyes snapped back to Cal, realization dawning. The core wasn't just alive. It was connected to the shipyard, to everything Cal had rebuilt. If they couldn't shut it down, it wouldn't just reshape the future. It would collapse the entire system, wiping out everyone on board. Cal. Lena shouted again, but this time there was an edge to her voice. You've gone too far. This place, it's going to tear itself apart. Cal didn't flinch. It already has, Lena. You just haven't seen it yet. The room shook again, more violently this time, and Lena could feel the shipyard systems start to falter. The energy from the core was destabilizing the entire station, ripping apart the fabric of its once immense power. Desperation surged through Lena as she made a split-second decision. The only way to stop Cal, stop the core, was to sever its connection to the shipyard, to sever the link that allowed Cal to control its power. She turned to the control console nearby, her mind racing. Her fingers moved in a blur, inputting commands to override the shipyard's failing systems. The console flickered, sparks flying as she worked against the clock. There was no time to waste. The core was expanding, consuming everything around them. Behind her, Tessa and Ian had their weapons raised, ready to fight. But Lena knew this was beyond simple gunfire. It wasn't a war against enemies. It was a war against the very foundation of reality itself. I'm initiating the shutdown, Lena said, voice grim. Everyone, get clear. We need to sever the connection before this entire station implodes. Lena, don't. Cal's voice rang out, tinged with panic for the first time. He surged toward her, his hands outstretched, the light from the core growing blinding. You'll destroy everything. everything we've worked for." But Lena didn't hesitate. She slammed the final command into the console, activating the shutdown sequence. The shipyard groaned, and the core's energy flared, its light reaching its peak as it let out a sound, both beautiful and terrifying. The universe seemed to hold its breath. And then, with a violent, earth-shattering roar, the core's power collapsed in on itself, its energy imploding and sending shockwaves throughout the shipyard. Lena stumbled, nearly falling, as the lights flickered out and the room descended into a deafening silence. When the dust settled, Cale lay motionless on the ground, his once dominant presence reduced to nothing more than a shadow of what he had been. Lena stood over him, the weight of the past and future heavy on her shoulders. They had won, but at what cost? The shipyard was in ruins. The war had only just begun. But Earth had a fighting chance.